So it boils down to two things. Can America defend Taiwan, and will America defend Taiwan?
In Taiwan Strait, people always say there is strategic ambiguity.
Right.
I don't think so. I think we have strategic clarity. No, I think we have strategic clarity. We have tactical ambiguity.
Does America have the ability to protect Taiwan militarily? Because China's military buildup has been very scary in recent years.
Okay, so when it comes to capabilities, I don't want to elaborate here in the public show. Okay. But the answer is yes.
Okay, let's talk about Hong Kong.
Okay.
How do we revive Hong Kong's democracy, or it's a lost case and we should just move on?
Hong Kong is a very symbolic case in promoting democracy and human rights. The reason Hong Kong is different from China since 1997 is because there is an international understanding and the Chinese Communist Party's promise, a solemn promise, that Hong Kong will remain separate from China in its political system. Hong Kong will keep its freedom, its rule of law, its judicial independence. In other words, Hong Kong would maintain a high degree of autonomy. That promise was taken seriously by the global community. China has solemnly sworn they're going to abide by its own promise. That promise was broken. That promise was shamelessly broken. So that's why to bring back Hong Kong's democracy, Hong Kong's freedom and basic autonomy, you have to really keep Hong Kong separate from Chinese Communist Party's model of governance. That is looking really more and more unlikely in light of the recent developments in the last year or so. Because the Chinese government seems to be determined to keep Hong Kong as if it's one of its own provinces. That's very unfortunate. And I think, the saddest thing is Hong Kong elites, much of Hong Kong elites went along with it. The protests are very feeble. The strongest protests have been brutally suppressed. So there is only a phony mask of the rule of the law in Hong Kong because the judicial system has lost its independence. And the journalism in Hong Kong has lost its basic freedoms. So it's a long way to go. I do not see the immediate future of returning Hong Kong to where it was 3 years ago, right now. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's no hope, because Hong Kong still wants the world to believe that it is a vibrant city. Its financial institutions can continue to function as it was before, even though there's a lot of doubt, but the Hong Kong government can still pretend that's the case. So that pretension can be used both ways, right? So I think there's a shrinking leverage the world can do to bring back freedom to Hong Kong. But the leverage is not totally gone yet.
Do you think Hong Kong's future now is more than ever depends on China's future? Like what kind of China we will get will decide what kind of Hong Kong will get.
Not only Hong Kong's future depends on China's future. The entire region, to a larger degree, the whole world's future, it depends on China's future. Because China is a country of great significance to many of our daily lives. Not only from the material point of view, but also from the point of view of political philosophy, from point of view what kind of life we will be living in 20, 30 years from now. And I think, if the Chinese Communist Party's model of governance prevails, and then we'll all be in trouble. So it's incumbent upon all of us to face this challenge, to guide the future direction of China to its natural and I think it's a wholesome conclusion. That's not something that we're going to do it to change the regime, as people always try to warn us say if we push China too hard, change regime, that basically make Chinese people all mad at the United States. The question actually is wrong. The question right now is not whether we want to have regime change or not. The question should be asked is, if the Chinese current system does not change, will the Chinese Communist Party model of governance change all of us? So that's the key question. So, and I think, we should not really assume we have the natural capability, we have the natural rights to change China, but we have to really assume absolutely that we have the right to defend ourselves.
Very strong words. When we talk about Hong Kong, we have to talk about Taiwan. So what's your assessment of the security situation in the Taiwan Strait?
Well, the Taiwan security situation has always been the same. There's only articulation of that kind of a confrontational nature. China never wants to give up its threat of use of force. The United States has never given up its commitment to the defense of Taiwan, right? So Taiwanese have never given up its strong desire to maintain status quo, to keep Taiwan as it is. To keep status quo is not the same as Taiwanese independence. Nobody in Taiwan is talking about Taiwanese independence. Everybody's talking about keep Taiwan as it is. So that is basically what we've been doing. Now, the reason why Taiwan is deserving of the world's help is because Taiwan represented really, in my view, a possible future model for entire China. It is a deeply traditional society, yet it is the most vibrant democracy in the whole region. It has completed something that very few nations have completed with such ease, that is transition from a dictatorship to democracy. So I think if I were Taiwanese, I would be really, really proud of what Taiwan has accomplished. It's a very diverse society. It has a completely healthy, functioning mechanism of a normal democracy. Right. In many ways, it has something that's much more sort of a commonsensical approach to some of the issues. For example, their election system, their public health system. Yes. So it's pretty amazing. It's inspirational for people, for all Chinese-speaking people, including people in mainland China. So that's why Taiwan is very important from aspirational point of view. Secondly, Taiwan has done so much good to the world. It has been a responsible member of the global trading system. It has one of the most advanced technological sectors in the world. It holds some of the key manufacturing capabilities in key industries in the world. Semiconductor, for example. Right. So, and Taiwan's intelligentsia has been very vibrant. So Taiwan is no longer an island democracy. Taiwan is an active member of the global community. As such, the world should give Taiwan much more space to operate internationally. China wants to minimize Taiwan's space in the international arena. That's going to backfire, because it just shows how narrow-minded, how backward the Chinese collective leadership's mindset is. And China should learn from Taiwan rather than trying to stifle it, to threaten it. So I feel very optimistic about the future of Taiwan, because after all, Taiwan is a really something that a lot of people in mainland China aspire to be in. And I think for Taiwan's leaders as well, I think, I hope they don't think of themselves as a small, tiny country of small insignificance. They should be very proud of themselves, and they should think big. And they should always think big. Mm-hmm.
You are a military historian, so the fact that you are not overly concerned about the safety and security of the Taiwan Strait is comforting to a lot of people.
Well, I am concerned, but I also understand the security environment in which China operates, right, is China has advantages, but it's not entirely in its own favor because there's a lot of things that Chinese military action will be impeded. U.S. commitment to Taiwan's defense and China's overall security environment around its periphery, and those are all bad. So China right now, it's hard for them to afford major military action without evoking major backlash among many nations along its borders, right? So, and I think China will be further isolated from the international community. And to see China stifle Hong Kong democracy, Hong Kong freedom, Hong Kong's autonomy, and then the world has reacted violently. China is further isolated. I mean, you have major officials in Hong Kong government sanctioned. They couldn't even get their credit card functioning. So that's the degree to which the whole world is repulsed by China's action in Hong Kong. Taiwan is slightly different. Taiwan is much stronger. Taiwan is much more autonomous. Taiwan has its own functioning mechanism of the government. So Taiwan has international alliance of different kinds. And I think, most importantly, Taiwan has the moral support of majority of the countries in the world.
Yeah.
Even though they may not have a diplomatic support, but the moral support is tremendous.
That's definitely true. I think a lot of people think Taiwan's safety depends on the, how do you say, a equation, It depends on how China weighs, which side, the pros and cons of invading Taiwan. If the pros overwhelms the cons, they might as well do it. So do you think right now that it's not to that point yet?
Well, I think the key to major international hotspots, and actually the key to solving all the security crises in major international hotspots is actually the role of the American military. And we are the peacekeeper. And we, through our strong military presence in Asia Pacific, we prevented major wars from happening in some of the very confrontational security environments, particularly along Taiwan Strait.
Right.
So I think since the Korean War, it is Americans' security commitment to Taiwan's defense that prevented the Chinese Communist Party from taking risky actions and not preserved the peace and stability along Taiwan Strait for decades. So we have a less clarified, less transparent defense commitment to Taiwan. In other words, we no longer have a mutual defense arrangement, but we still have a very solid commitment to Taiwan's self-defense. And according to the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act. Okay. So Americans' military presence in Pacific must be preserved, and we have made that very clear. We have a strong military presence in Japan, in South Korea, in Guam, and in South China Sea. And Taiwan is part of that all so-called first island chain. So it's very important for America to keep it that way and to preserve peace. We don't want anybody's territory. And Japanese want us to be there to defend itself against its vital enemies in the region. So, and I think, we should keep that. And I think, the American military presence in that area is probably the most key factor to preserving peace and stability. And I think, anybody who is willing to take a military risk must consider that. And we have made that very clear. We have made it very clear. In Taiwan Strait, people always say there is strategic ambiguity. Right. I don't think so. I think we have strategic clarity. No, I think we have strategic clarity. We have tactical ambiguity. So, and that's very important. We never told the Chinese that we're not going to abandon Taiwan if we do some A, B, C, D. We always say peace and stability along the Taiwan Strait is key to American interest.
Okay.
We don't tell the Chinese how many aircraft carrier we'll send over there. And that's ambiguous because that's tactical, right? But strategically speaking, I think we have been very clear to the Chinese. And that's a very important point to keep in mind.
Okay. So it boils down to two things. Can America defend Taiwan, and will America defend Taiwan? The answer to those two questions are?
I think American people are more and more aware how Taiwan is related to the United States. Taiwan is not the regional issue. Just the same way as West Berlin was not just regional issue in 1948, 1949, when the Berlin crisis occurred. Mm-hmm. To preserve West Berlin and its freedom is not just a American problem, it's a global problem, right? So that's why we led the world to preserve West Berlin and its freedom for decades until the evil empire is gone. So Taiwan is the same thing. So we have that, and Taiwan is actually very important because Taiwan is at the forefront of confronting Chinese communism. And it has so many resources we Americans could use, right, to benefit our own system. Yeah. For example, Taiwanese are very sophisticated in preventing election fraud and election interference from foreign countries. Mm-hmm. They have a very sophisticated cyber defense to preserve its integrity of election systems. Mm. We in America also have the same problem. And each election in recent memories, we have had that problem. Foreign sovereign government interfere with American electoral processes. And that's something we can learn from Taiwanese. We have. Mm-hmm. So, and also, Taiwanese are very, very successful in economics and trade. And they make an incredible contribution to global wealth. We, America, our major industries were gradually more and more dependent on the Taiwanese suppliers, right? Mm-hmm. Semiconductor, for example, right? So that's why Taiwan's economy and American economy were more and more integrated. Right. And let alone the free exchange of intellectual talents in Taiwan and the United States. I mean, it's very, very robust. And I think, in other words, Taiwanese and Americans, we have so much more in common to share.
Yeah. I was wondering if that's the Trump administration's strategy to protect Taiwan the most powerful way, just to let Taiwan has so much interest to other countries. You have investment, the EU have investment in Taiwan, America has investment in Taiwan. You have so much invested interest in Taiwan, so you cannot abandon Taiwan.
Well, Taiwan is actually yes, Taiwan is very important. Taiwan provides a very healthy and meritorious alternative to China. Mm. When China banned foreign journalists, they normally, in the old time, they went to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is no longer free, no longer autonomous. So now, drove of those foreign journalists that kicked out by the Chinese regime went to Taiwan. Mm. And that's a good thing. Taiwan provides a very good alternative to the Chinese model of governance. One of the biggest lessons the world has learned in the last several decades is our over-dependence on Chinese in our supply chains. And I think in many, many countries right now are realizing that's a mistake, so they're trying to diversify their supply chain. So they're trying to lessen their dependence on China. Mm. Taiwan is a perfect alternative to that. You can see international capitals gradually move away out of China. They have several places to go, right? India, Vietnam, and now obviously Taiwan. Particularly some of the industries that rely on, say, Chinese language capabilities, and the Chinese culture affiliation, and they're all moved to Taiwan. I know there are many Chinese language learning programs among many universities and colleges in the United States. Mm-hmm. They are ending their operations in China. Where'd they go? They go to Taiwan. So that's the very natural solution to solving our over-dependency on China.
Right, right. Another big question is, does America have the ability to protect Taiwan militarily? Because China's military buildup has been very scary in recent years.
Okay, so when it comes to capabilities, I don't want to elaborate here in the public show, but the answer is yes.
Okay, that's good enough.
America is the oldest democracy in the world. We started somewhere around 250 years ago. Our system, to a large degree, is based upon the 18th century Enlightenment understanding of government philosophy. Some of them are very, very basic, and we should have become universal principles. Number one is basically limited government. Government cannot be strong, unlike China's Marxist-Leninist party state, where the state is absolutely powerful and people are powerless. Second principle that helped build the American system was the idea of sovereign or popular sovereignty. In other words, it's the people who decided what form, how the government operates. So it deals with the consent of the governed. So those major principles are all there, but specific mechanism of how to produce a leader, right? How to run elections were still based upon old technology, based upon our environment that was like 250 years ago. Taiwanese democracy has done more than anybody I know that updated those election mechanisms and make it really, really good and to more effectively reflect those major principles laid out by the founding fathers of America, and which has become global. For example, the issue of limited government, right? The issue of popular sovereignty, and in Taiwan election, in the United States, I mean, the election always takes place on Tuesdays.
Right.
In the 18th century, makes perfect sense because of the communication means and also the limitation to people's participation in the election. So Tuesday is a working day nowadays. So it's a really limited people's participation in the election on that particular day. Taiwan election, they solved that problem. Their election always takes place on Saturdays. So it's day off. So more and more people participate in those things, in election. And then secondly, you might say, with the advent of modern communication technologies, popular pollings can have tremendous impact upon how people vote. And that also subject the nation to manipulation of statistics, polling methods, and partisan bickerings. And in Taiwan, for example, there was a law that actually prohibits publication of any polling data 10 days before the election day. And I thought that was a very good one, right? And I think, Taiwanese actually have a much more balanced referendum system. In other words, if there's some major issue affecting the nation, and you can basically conduct another round of referendum to hear the voice of the people, so to speak. America is a federal system. It's very big. So election basically is run by different states. Different states have different standards of conducting elections. And that created some problems, even though there was a Supreme Court to sort of try to unify the nation's laws. But still, each state has tremendous power regulating how a state could run. And the integrity and accuracy of the elections vary tremendously in the United States, right? Depends on which party is in power. In Taiwan, you don't have that problem. Maybe it has something to do with the size of the country. It's small, much easier to administer. So I'm just giving you those examples. Taiwanese democracy is very vibrant. It's very thorough. But most importantly, it's very fair. A society without fairness is a society without justice. A society without justice is a society without security. And that's why mainland China is a society without fairness, and therefore is a society without justice. Without justice, the society is not stable. It looks stable, but anytime the Chinese society can erupt like a volcano.
Right.
The leaders know this. That's why they were so frantic, controlling people, throwing tremendous resources at taxpayers' expense to controlling the very people that are supporting and feeding the government.
Yeah, I strongly echo your point. I think in China, the interesting thing about China is prosperity and demise can coexist all the time. Like you can have both. You can have prosperity, but one thing change and you can have the total demise.
Well, you see, that's all boils down to governance. If the governance model is lousy, the government is not stable. Okay. People always have this erroneous notion that somehow if Chinese people are better off economically, they're richer, therefore the government would be more stable. The CCP will be there forever. That's wrong, because the opposite is true. If people are richer, they have more property. When they have more property, they need the constitutional law to guarantee their property rights. If they don't have property rights protection, and then they are not very happy. And all major revolutions were led by the property class, middle class. The French Revolution were led by the third estate, the people who getting rich but without political power, without social justice, right? You can say, the American civil rights and American Revolution are all led by people who want to preserve the property rights. China does not have property rights. Government of China has enormous power. It doesn't respect property rights. The government can take your property away. You can become rich, but government can take your wealth away. Yeah. Look at what happened to Ma Yun, what happened to those billionaires, let alone to ordinary powerless people. So that's why a lot of people in China, when they're getting rich, the first thing to think of is taking their wealth out of China, right, to go somewhere else where their property can be protected, their assets can be protected. And of course, the Chinese government restricts free flow of currency. So in other words, China is a very controlled society. A controlled society cannot have longevity.
That's true. Last question. What would a U.S.-China relationship look like without the Chinese Communist Party?
I hope the Chinese Communist Party will still continue to exist, but as one of the multi-party society. In the United States, we have the Communist Party. In Russia, they still have the Communist Party. In many Western countries, they have Communist Party too. But they all function within the multi-party democratic system. They don't have a party monopoly, right? So in the future, I hope the Chinese people will make a wise decision to make China a diverse democratic system where all kinds of political interests come from their own parties. All kinds of political opinions can be freely expressed without fear, without being afraid of being persecuted by a powerful, unhinged state. So I think by then, the Chinese people will have a bright future. And American people have always had tremendous good wishes for the Chinese people to succeed. If you look at the modern Chinese history, I think the United States is among the most benign foreign powers to preserve China's national interest, right? We did it not only during World War I, we also did it in Washington Conference in the 1920s. We prevented Western powers from dismembering China. And I think during World War II, we forged a genuine alliance, and America and China's We both talk about how to preserve four freedoms, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom of religion, and many other things that President Roosevelt and generation of Chiang Kai-shek, and they exchanged a lot of ideas in those days. And of course, after Chinese communists took over, and China basically, become very hostile to the United States, and even though Richard Nixon went to China, opened up China to the rest of the world, but this relationship is based on a lot of illusions, which we talked about earlier. So I think, right now, until China becomes democratic, until Chinese people have freedom, the world will not be safe. And because a Marxist-Leninist party in charge of a huge nation, taking advantage of free market system of global trade, poses the imminent danger to us all.
Mm-hmm. So if China becomes a free country, the United States won't care if China, becomes so technological or economic advance, maybe even surpass America and becomes the world superpower.
No, I mean, America is always optimistic, self-confident country. I mean, I think, if all people follow the same rule, if all people play the same game of following the same rule, and we can compete with each other fairly, squarely, and America is not afraid of anybody, right? So, and I think we have this self-confidence, and this is basically a successful story of the United States. When the United States started in 1776, it has 4 million people from 13 colonies. Over the years, has grown tremendously. We have this system that's so great. We attract all the talents from all over the place, come to the United States to become what we know as the American nation. Mm-hmm. And that is a tremendously successful story in human history. So I think, I hope China will have the same kind of virtues. We would love to have the Chinese people competing freely in the international system. China will become strong and without fear, and without this kind of a very limited view of the world, and because in the information control area, a lot of people really do not have the whole picture, so they become very xenophobic in a way, and that's not really good for everybody. So I think the future of China and the future of the United States all hinges on one thing, that is freedom, which actually is the ultimate message of President Reagan and Secretary Pompeo in particular.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. Very strong.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
No. Good luck with your trip back to California. And good luck with your house hunting here. Yeah.